Miranda Nation, congratulations on your film. Congratulations for the quality, I think, of the film, certain observations aside. But I'm tending to congratulate anyone who actually makes a feature film in Australia at the moment. Can I just ask, was it difficult to make Undertow?
Yes, as you say, I think getting any feature up in Australia at the moment is challenging. Raising finance for a feature film, whatever its budget level, is always difficult. Undertow, because it's, I suppose, a female-driven story, and we were working on it before Me Too happened, before Time's Up, and before the Gender Matters initiative. So, you know, there weren't necessarily those initiatives in place yet to start acknowledging women's voices. And also the subject matter is not light, it's not easy, it's not a rom-com, so all those things made it possibly more difficult.
So it's an accidentally timely film?
Yes, we actually shot it before Me Too, and then it was through the post-production period that Me Too erupted and Time's Up. So it's not accidentally in terms of our passions, our passions lie, but in terms of coinciding with the Me Too movement, it was coincidental.
Can you just tell me the genesis of the project and how long it took to get up?
So I worked as an actor before I moved into writing and directing. So back sort of 10 years ago, I was working as an actor, and a friend and mentor of mine said to me, why don't you write something for yourself to act in? I was a little frustrated with, you know, it's a very competitive industry, and I was saying that there weren't, you know, it was hard to get a really challenging, interesting role as a woman. So he suggested I write something for myself to act in, which I was already writing. I've always been a writer, so I started doing that, and I'd also been making a few short films.
So in a nutshell, describe what the film is about.
So it's a psychological thriller about Claire, who's grieving the loss of a pregnancy close to term of a baby, and she meets pregnant teenager Angie, and Claire starts to project her unresolved grief into an obsession with Angie and Angie's unborn child.
Well, she meets Angie, who she suspects is having an affair with her footballer husband.
Yes, well, he's actually a football manager. He's in marketing, yeah.
Okay. And what were the main themes in the film that you wanted to explore?
For me, the key theme in the film is about the body and our relationships with our bodies, and that's something that recurs in most of my work, is that relationship with our bodies and our sexuality, and the fact that the body can be a sort of battleground. You know, we quite evolved and we manifest control over so many aspects of our lives, but then our own body can be this realm that we have little control over. So that comes into play in different ways for all the four characters. For Claire, going through the trying to conceive and have a family, and suddenly she's found out that her body's not obeying her carefully laid out plan. For Angie, with her unwanted pregnancy, for Brett, the ex-footballer character who has been sort of lauded and celebrated for his physicality, but now in retirement is finding that is crumbling and he's struggling with addiction. So yeah, that theme of the body is really the key theme for me.
Angie? I came to see Dan.
Dan's not here. I've been calling you. Looking for you. You have to stop running away. I can't look after you if you keep running away.
I don't want you to look after me.
I'm afraid something's gonna happen to you and the baby.
Would you just shut up about the baby? It's none of your business.
It is my business. It's... Give it back. Give it.
Also, you have a theme of obsession
Yes.
in this film, which is a very common, very popular genre topic. We see a lot of films about obsession. There was, of course, the film Obsession by Brian De Palma, which then borrowed from Vertigo, the Hitchcock film, which is also about obsession. So obsession has quite a tradition in film. In this film, you do have an obsession element in there, wherein Claire almost projects her lost pregnancy onto the unwanted pregnancy of Angie. But your film doesn't then follow the contour of what could have been, I guess, a broader film about obsession. Can I just ask you about why you did that, or why you didn't play on the obsession thing a little bit more?
Well, for me, that central story of Claire's grief and her unresolved grief, and we were playing with a real diagnosis called brief reactive psychosis, whereby someone has suffered a trauma, someone who has no incidents of mental illness in their past, but a traumatic event can send them into a temporary psychosis. So we really wanted to play with the idea of the unreliable narrator. So we start wondering whether what Claire is imagining is or seeing is actually real or imagined. So definitely the obsession was a part of that, but I didn't feel like it was the overriding force. So I suppose in that way we've treated what could be, I suppose, one of the more kind of known psychosexual stalker kind of tropes in a different way.
The subject matter of this film deals with a woman coping with the loss of a child in birth. It's come up sporadically in film, but it's a little bit surprising that such a major event in a woman's life hasn't been dealt with in any serious way in film. You, to your credit, you and your cast do, I think, a great job in evoking the pain and the psychological consequences of losing a child.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, and I think it speaks to the fact that there is still a bit of a taboo or a stigma around pregnancy loss, even though it's so common. And when I was researching, every second person, you just start speaking about it, and everyone's got a story, or if it's not them personally, or their partner, or their wife, their sister, it's just so common, and yet it's hasn't really been spoken about. And I don't know whether that's because when someone who is known to people dies, at least there's a sort of point of reference. When it's an unborn child, then no one else has known that person, even though it's so very intimate and close for the couple that is pregnant, or whether it's kind of seen as women's business that is not spoken about, and that people should just kind of hush it up and deal with it themselves. I'm not sure.
It's really the case that there's a reluctance to deal with female issues. Do you think that that's an issue in 2020 still?
I think it is. I mean, I think we've seen from the Time's Up movement that now the conversation is starting to shift, and there's an acknowledgement that these stories are important and that people want to watch them, and that it resonates with a lot of people's experience. Maybe in the past television's been more the realm of dealing with these issues, but I think we chose to explore it through a thriller, body horror almost lens, which I think is always really great lens to explore such kind of emotional and psychological subject matter. But I do think that there's still a long way to go in terms of what's being financed and what's seen as financeable.
Cinematography in this film is really evocative and moody. What did you shoot on, and what was your principle? What was the guiding principle of the style of the film?
We shot on an Alexa. And so, as I said, Bonnie, the DP, who is just an incredibly talented woman, she and I had made a short together in 2013. It was a standalone short, but it spoke to the themes and the style of the feature that we wanted to make. And so again, it was about the body and the protagonist's relationship with her body and illness. Bonnie is an amazing cinematographer in that she's very much about the image, but she's also very much about story. So we had so many discussions in pre-production and about the script and the imagery that I'd created on the page, and we looked at references and we looked at mood boards and so forth. And for us, that idea of the body as a landscape was really pivotal, and juxtaposing this quite sort of close, visceral, intimate imagery and camera work with the bigger landscapes where the character becomes just a moving point, water is a great motif, so the cycle of life, and yes, I suppose that was our biggest theme that we wanted to convey.
You drew personal experience into this film, is that true?
That's true, yes.
Well, can I ask what the situation was?
So, I mean, when I was first writing it, I hadn't had that personal experience of pregnancy or pregnancy loss. I just, imagined it as a particularly traumatic experience that someone could go through. Then I always had a great plan that I was going to make my first feature and then start a family, but the development stretched on and I was getting older. So we thought we better just go for it. So then we, had our own struggle with falling pregnant. We lost a pregnancy. Then we had our daughter, who was 1 when we shot the film. And then we've just had another child who's 3 months old now. But between that, we had a couple more miscarriages. So it kind of was art imitating life, imitating art. It all became woven together.
It is still amazing how many male bonding films there are just at the Oscars. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a film about mateship, about blokes. And there are a lot of films about the relationship between guys. Miranda, we don't see the equivalent, or even near the equivalent, with female bonding or films, or films about sisterhood. Frozen is a notable exception. What do you think of this issue?
Look, I think it's, there are, as you say, there are films like Frozen and others that are putting girls and women into the lead roles and really trying to sort of change the status quo. I've got a just 4-year-old, she turned 4 last weekend, and so, the last 4 years we've been gradually exposing her to different literature and film, etc. And it's amazing when you're reading books to your child, how many books still have the masculine pronoun. There's such a small amount of books that have a she character as the lead character. And I think it's the same in film and other forms of art. So, it's we still need to keep working on that. I think it's definitely, we need to create more of a balance so that young girls growing up are seeing themselves, women are seeing themselves reflected on screen. Are
you a feminist filmmaker, or do you consider yourself a feminist?
I definitely consider myself a feminist. I don't really consider myself a feminist filmmaker. To be honest, I just made a film that I would like to see and that I would like to act in if I was still an actor.
Right. Regarding the need, acknowledge the need to redress the balance, do you think it's a case of active resistance against it, or is it a matter merely of more action needed?
Look, I'm not an expert in this, but I think when there's been an industry, like we see in any industry that's been typically male-dominated, it's hard to change that kind of systemic bias without taking action and without, we've seen in some countries where they have introduced quotas, and I know that's always controversial because people want to be chosen on merit, as do I. I want to be making good films, not just good films made by a female, and I want to be making films and being financed because I'm a filmmaker and a good filmmaker, not because I'm a female. But I think we also, the flip side of that is that you can't expect something to change without actively pushing for change. So if that means that we need to have initiatives like Gender Matters, where we're actively pushing women in, and the great Indigenous initiatives as well, and the great initiatives to encourage diversity of all types in the screen industry, then we do need to have those programs to push change, because it won't just happen by itself if something has been entrenched, if a bias is entrenched.
As a filmmaker, you say that you want to be seen as a filmmaker, not a female filmmaker, which is a terrific stance to take. You do, however, make the point that you had an all-female crew on this film. You've actually emphasised that yourself, yeah?
So just for the record, it wasn't completely female. No. There was a female in each of the heads of departments roles. Bonnie Elliott, our DP, consciously works with an all-female camera crew, which is unusual because it's quite usually more men in the camera roles. We had plenty of men on set, and it was, I think a great balance. But we did consciously want to work with women.
Right. I'd like to know what the purpose, what the intent of that is, because it's not just a matter of policy. you're actually making the policy known. We consciously went for an all-woman or a mostly women crew. What's the point that you are wanting to prove?
Well, there's a number of facets to it. So we, as women, I guess we're making a film that interested us, about subject matter that interested us. We had a lot of collaborators already who happened to be women. Bonnie and I had worked together. We worked together for about, we made our short in 2013, so we were working together for about 4 years on the feature before we actually shot it. But then we also, Lynn and I, felt strongly that we wanted to support women. Sometimes women find it harder to gain opportunities in the industry, and also that can be related to, family obligations, that sort of thing. So we wanted to create a supportive environment where women with merit, and there are so many talented women, it's not hard to find those women, but we wanted to make sure that we were giving opportunity. And we also, I suppose, wanted to create an atmosphere of respect and support for the actors who were dealing with some confronting themes, and there's nudity. But having said that, as Laura and I have pointed out in interviews, there were a lot of very respectful men on the set as well. Yeah.
So can I ask again, just respectfully, what degree merit played in the appointing of these positions, and did you consciously go for women over men?
Oh no, not at all. Merit was 100%. We were never going to compromise the film just to choose a woman if she didn't have the talent. But that's what I'm saying. There's no shortage of talented women, so it wasn't at all hard to work with women.
Okay, so you never, again for the record, so you never appointed a woman as head of a department instead of a man because of gender. It was always a merit.
Yeah, and we had men in heads of department roles as well.
Okay.
So they were often shared with a woman actually. Like for scheduling reasons, we ended up having 2 editors on the project. One was a woman, one was a man. Likewise, we had a composing team made up of 2 men and 1 woman. So, it was always based on who was the best person for the job, while also consciously wanting to support women and speak to women about the roles.
Can I just ask you, as an independent filmmaker, what shall become of this movie?
Well, we have our national release today.
Yes. It is the 5th of March,
5th
2020.
of March, yes. Look, I mean, we're very happy that we are having a cinema release. It's not always easy for smaller Australian films even to be seen on cinema screens.
There you can say that again.
With the changing, viewing platforms and the diminishing cinema audiences, unfortunately, and, the more and more competition for those existing audiences. So we'll have to see. I mean, it's a film that I think from our screenings to date has resonated very strongly with people, with all sorts of people, men, women, younger audience, older audience. But as you know, Jim, for this type of film, it's reliant on word of mouth. We don't have the big marketing budgets to put us on billboards and the sides of buses, etc.
I'm a studio head who's seen your lovely little film and said, listen, this is a really, really nice film, Miranda, we love it. What we do want you to do is that we want you to beef up the 3rd act so that it'll have a big dramatic payoff. You have a scene in the ocean. We maybe want you to just sort of rethink what happens there and just give us a big, nice, big commercial 3rd act to the film. In return for this, we will distribute your film, major platform release across this country, and we'll also get our American friends to come in with a release exposure pattern for you as well. What would you say to that?
Gosh, that's a tough one. I mean, everyone wants their film to be seen, but also, I guess, to compromise your vision and the story. I'd have to think about it and think if I could come up with something that satisfied both, ticked both boxes that I felt was satisfying to me as a filmmaker and for the audience, but also could get the film out more widely.
Okay, making the point that there is no right or wrong answer to this,
Sure.
and I have had great responses to this question. So, provided that central principles and themes that you wanted in the film were preserved, you'd be happy to put in a beefier, more heightened third act to the film, provided that you were able to rewrite it in a way that respected the core values of the film.
Yes, absolutely. And also, this has been a huge learning experience for me making this film. I suppose there's things I would do differently if I could do it again. Every director probably has the director's cut in their mind, so who's to say that my director's cut wouldn't be a bigger, beefier third act?
Now, where did you make this movie?
We shot it early to mid 2017.
And it's coming out now.
And we finished it in early 2018.
Can you tell me why it has taken so long?
Well, I can't tell you exactly why without, betraying sort of confidentiality, but, it is just about, it is the difficulty of getting smaller films onto screens, and we had pursued a couple of pathways that ended up falling through, so...
What's the future for films like this? Is it going straight to streaming, which is an option, but there's also an element of invisibility with that, because how do people know?
Well, I suppose, but you've seen things like The King recently, or History of the Kelly Gang, which, have had their small cinema window, but have been largely made by Netflix, or I'm not sure Kelly Gang at what point Stan came on, but basically their cinema release is just in conjunction with the online SVOD release, so maybe that's where we're going to see more, the direction for more films, both bigger and smaller. I'm not sure. I'm still kind of working it out as we go, I think.
The issue of development time, is it the case that you need the time to develop the project, or you could develop the project in a much shorter time if other external factors were helping you out or were in play? Is it the case?
I think so. I think we do have a bit of a development problem in Australia. Things tend to get lost in development. I think a film like this, perhaps if we'd shot it a few years earlier, I don't know, perhaps it wouldn't have been so developed, but it may have, I do think for emerging filmmakers, sometimes we just need to get that first film out. It's not going to be perfect. Of course, we all want it to go to Cannes or, be the perfect film, but sometimes things can get bogged down in development, and it's sort of not helping that exciting, spontaneous turnover of films that I think we need to see.
How do you live? You're an independent filmmaker. Are you making commercials or corporate videos? How do you live?
I'm not involved in the commercial world, although I think that would be a good option. I've always had part-time jobs outside the industry that have paid the bills, essentially, and because, income from making films, from writing, from directing is sporadic. So having a family, especially, it's always been important to have, that job that will pay the bills in the quiet times, and I think that's always the challenge for independent creatives. So I work, not at the moment because I've just had a baby, but I work at Foundation House, which is the Victorian Foundation for Survivors of Torture and Trauma. So Paris Aristotle heads up that organisation, and they do counselling and advocacy for asylum seekers and refugees, largely anyone who's suffered from trauma in their past. So it's a wonderful place to work, very worthwhile.